So Pastor Shane Idleman, let's dig right into Lent. This is a big topic this time of year, but I'm going to have you explain to us what Lent is.
Well, anytime we've tried to promote something like this, you get, people kind of the Protestant, Roman Catholic kind of fighting in between there. Mainly Protestants do not understand the concept. It actually started back, I believe, around 325 AD, Council of Nicaea. That's when that council met. And then it was just, it's actually 46 days. People don't know this, minus the Sundays. So it's 40 days. We do that, but it was started at 46 days if you take out the Sundays, or add the Sundays, I should say. There's a way that they did that. So it was just a time of remember, because remember the early church, and we've kind of lost that zeal. It was a time of reflection of the importance of the cross. I mean, let's talk about what we're preparing for, that Resurrection Sunday. And so they would prepare their hearts with the season of fasting and prayer and kind of the Old Testament imagery of repentance, sackcloth, the ashes, the fasting, the prayer. And that's when it started. And then, of course, Roman Catholicism added some things with Ash Wednesday and the ash, but a huge amount of Protestants still celebrate this time of preparing our hearts for the Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah, and let's talk about what can come out of that, because you have spoken a lot about fasting, right? But in the context of Lent, let's say somebody, in the Protestant world comes in and they say, we want to learn how to do this. We want to do it not because we're following, traditions made by man, but because we honestly want to do something sacrificial, for the Lord. Yes. What would you say to those people, and why should they maybe engage in that?
Well, what I do, so it doesn't turn into, works-based, God, I'm going to get these blessings from God. I'm going to please God. One thing about fasting is it doesn't bend God's arm, but it bends my knees in a time of prayer and seeking Him. And so I would take it to the Lord, and maybe God's convicting them on areas that they need to be more. That's what it is. It's a preparation of self-discipline, basically. And there's a time of, I need to get off of media for a while. Many people give up food. I mean, that's really biblical fasting. If we want to get real technical, is water only, but that alarms a lot of people. But they can give up meals. Maybe I'm not going to eat breakfast. I'm going to just wait till the evening, kind of intermittent fasting or OMAD, 1 meal a day type of thing. But then they pig out later in the evening. You're missing the concept there. So it's really, I would take it to the Lord and say, Lord, I want to clean my life of these areas. Help me understand what areas do I need help with self-discipline. And that's the wonderful thing about fasting is you're starving King's stomach in order to be just pursuing God even more.
Yeah, no, and that's really interesting, because I was going to ask you, you mentioned biblical fasting, but what are some of the ways that maybe, if somebody were looking for other options for things they could do, and then I want to get more into fasting, what are some ways they could observe Lent?
Well, the concept is a time of getting our hearts right as we go into Resurrection Weekend, Sunday. I mean, we have Friday night service, Saturday night service, Sunday morning services, so it's because it's powerful when your heart's right. You walk into just the season where you've repented. Your self-discipline, I don't think it should be a period of 6 weeks of self-discipline and then give up and go back to our old habits. This is a time to really instill some good habits into our life. So I would start with what there's a conviction usually in many of our hearts, what I need to give up, whether it's sugar, caffeine. A lot of people stop smoking. And the reason fasting is so hard, I'm going to drop a spiritual bomb right now. The reason fasting is so hard is actually not the fasting. It's the withdrawing from nicotine, sugar, caffeine, processed foods, chemicals, artificial. And so I can't fast. No, the problem is you're addicted. So begin getting off of those things that you're addicted to. And so that's why it's a wonderful season of preparing our hearts. And as you're praying and fasting more, you're really drawn in to just experiencing God in a more profound and powerful way.
Now you're a pastor, obviously, and you, like everyone else, you've been on a faith journey. At what point in that journey did you feel like fasting is something I haven't been doing, it's something I need to be doing? What was sort of that change for you that led you into this?
Oh, I remember clear as day this was about a decade ago. And what happened is I was reading all these books. I was reading the Bible, and then the fasting kept coming up. Ezra, Nehemiah, David, Esther, Of course, Elisha and Jesus and Moses and disciples fasted, and Paul said in much fasting. I'm like, wow, this is, and then I start to read, of course, a lot of Christian biographies of John Wesley, the Methodists, early church, the early church fathers. And like, wow, fasting was really an important part of the Didache or Didacte, however you pronounce it, early church writings. They would fast 3 days before being baptized. And so I finally, and I was convicted because in America, in our culture, I think it is actually the hardest culture out there as far as when it comes to fasting, because they didn't have food on every corner. They weren't addicted to it was a matter of just denying the flesh so I can pursue God. Try praying after a heavy meal. It's not possible. I can't even preach. I preach on an empty stomach. I preach in a fasted state because of that very reason. I go to prayer meetings in a fasted state because there's just something, 50% of the energy of converting food is drains the body. And so the physical and the spiritual run parallel. So when I do something physically, it often affects the spiritual. So I jumped in my first day on a Saturday, and boy, that was tough. And I realized I was withdrawing from certain things. And then I went a weekend, and that turned into more. And I know to me, people might think I fast too much or extreme about it. Well, that's because I'm helping others. God's called me to that. So I'm writing books on it where people can download our books for free at the church website, Westside Christian Fellowship, free downloads. And I just did a 40-day fasting journey that Amazon Prime picked up on their documentaries. And so that's my calling. So I wouldn't put this on other people, but I did a 40-day fast. I do, and I do fasting now and then. The impact was so profound in my preaching, in my daily life, in bringing the flesh under submission. Because think about it, I realized I was getting up. I want to go to Starbucks. I want to get a donut. And then I want to go to Chick-fil-A. And then I want to go here. And now I have to have chocolate. And now I'm going to eat too much. The flesh was just controlling every single aspect of the day. And so that's what fasting is. It's a time to say, flesh, be quiet. You're submitting to me. I'm no longer submitting to you. And it's thoroughly biblical. I mean, we could spend a lot of time just on the concept of fasting too.
Yeah. And what would you say to people? And you just described some of the changes in your own life, right? Because there are people who might say, oh, well, what happens? What do I get out of this, right? Which is not the right way to think of things spiritually, but the reality is a lot of people are going to think that. Yeah. What would you say to them in terms of the benefits? Well,
what's kind of motivating is anytime God calls us to do something spiritually, there are physical benefits. So, I mean, you could spend a lot of time on the physical benefits too, from autophagy to stem cell to telomeres on the DNA strand to Alzheimer's and dementia and even consuming certain cancers, tumors. I mean, the physical is incredible. But we don't do it because of that. So the spiritual it's buffeting the flesh. It's what am I going to get out of it? Yeah, I can't go into that other than, Lord, I need to know you more profoundly and powerfully. I need to starve this thing that is trying to draw me away from you. And there's been seasons where and I just did recently, fasted and the sleep and you get up at 2 a.m. and on fire for God and worship sounds incredible and you're just broken before God. But then the withdrawals hit a little bit later in the day and then you got to fight through those. And so I think it's just a wonderful opportunity. Think about it. We most of us can relate. King's stomach is in charge. He's in control. And everything's centered around food. We're always thinking about food. And there needs to be a season where we really I discipline my body daily and I bring it into subjection, Paul would say. So when I preach to others, I'm not disqualified because there is something about discipline that is very biblical and very profound.
And when it comes to, and this is a whole other podcast or discussion, but when it comes to, physical health too, a lot of us walk around telling everybody, don't smoke, don't overdrink, don't do this, don't do that. And we're severely overweight, right? Like it's like this one area we've accepted culturally as okay in the church too. But yet these other areas aren't, whereas self-discipline would matter in all of those areas, right?
Yeah, and even as a pastor, when I've lost, a lot of weight in the past and just you feel better, you're more effective. It's hard to go minister when you have a headache, tight pants, feeling sluggish, no energy. And so I think one of the greatest things going on right now is our healthcare system and the enemy just giving many Christians a certificate of non-operation, like from the DMV. I'm just worn out. I'm too tired. I'm too fatigued. We're addicted to our favorite thing. And it really, but self-discipline then also falls into, I mean, I won't get into a lot, but there's that the meat and food and all we're consuming, that animalistic nature is also tied to a lot of, you'll see sexual addiction. They also have food addictions. And so when you starve the flesh, there is, they used to do this for alcoholism too. I've got books on in the early 1900s where they would put alcoholics on a fast for a season, and it would really take away that desire. The body resets itself. So yes, the sugar cravings are gone. You're not even hungry anymore after 3 or 4 days of a water fast. But it's not easy, and people also need to be encouraged to fall forward, to get back on track. Sometimes it takes a while, but training the body and disciplining the body is I think just thoroughly biblical.
Well, Shane Idleman, as always, it is great getting to sit down and talk about this. We'll talk more about it. We'll have you back. Appreciate your time today.
Sounds good, Billy. Thank you too.